What are you trying to say? I scheduled time in my hectic schedule for this meeting because I was informed that there will be a multilingual speaker there. Many languages. About that, I had not heard anything. Was something incorrect? Mr. Irving was giving a presentation in English, and this was an important business meeting for the future of the company. One of the guests then began conversing in Mandarin. Chinese was not what we had expected, for sure. Is that false information? Wouldn't you stop at nothing to arrange this meeting? It's a trust issue here. There's been a misunderstanding. I was panicking much like Mr. Irving. I had to express myself. I got to my feet and spoke louder. Wait a moment. I'll respond. Naturally, everyone in the room looked at me. Now there was no going back. The greatest moan of my life began with this. My name is George. I'm 23 years old and looking for work right now. My health was destroyed by the corporation I worked for as a recent graduate, which put profit ahead of the welfare of its employees. I was forced to leave. I was raised in a single-parent home and began working immediately after high school since I couldn't afford to attend college. I had no alternative but to quit my job, even though I worked very hard to repay my mother for raising me alone. It's difficult for recent high school grads to get jobs. If I were by myself, I wouldn't give a damn about the work, but I want to help this person. Today I had another interview, but they looked at me skeptically when I mentioned my academic background and past health problems. I sighed as I opened my planner and saw all of the interview appointments. I need to start working shortly. Encouraging my mother's life appeared like a far-off dream. As I got off at the station in the downtown area, I saw someone leaning against one of the building walls. Did the individual feel ill? Some passed by, but none stopped to provide assistance. My mother always told me to be a compassionate person who lends a helping hand to people who are in need. I immediately knelt down by the person. Do you feel sick at all? Do I need to dial an ambulance? Sweat was trickling down her temples as she clasped a handkerchief to her mouth. I was shocked to see how stunning the woman was. She was only a little older than I was. She was most likely at work because she was dressed in a suit. She squinted her eyes and peered back at me. Yes, I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. You don't appear well. Come sit with me on that bench. Are you able to move? In the station square, I assisted her in finding a bench. I gave her a bottle of water that I had purchased from a nearby vending machine. Are you sure you don't need an ambulance? Yes, this happens often, so I'll be fine after a little rest. Is this a common occurrence? This is not the way you should be working outside. What happens if anything major occurs? Kindly look after yourself more. I quickly felt bad for saying that in a hurry. I used to tell my mother, take care of yourself. She put her own health last while working nonstop for me. She used to add, I want to make sure you have plenty to eat, despite the fact that her anemia and overwork usually left her immobile. My mother is the most important person in my life, so I wouldn't be content even if we could afford to eat nicely every day. That's the reason I detested those who overexerted themselves. Well, I guess I can't really talk since I wrecked my own health at my last job. The woman, who appeared much better, laughed and said, I never expected to be lectured. I'm sorry for being rude. Crude? I take it you were concerned about me. I'm grateful. And for also supporting me. No, I'm just glad you're feeling better. My recruitment bag, which I had sloppily set down at the end of the bench, fell down at that very moment. I had taken out my wallet and hadn't closed it properly, so the contents spilt out. There were documents strewn all over the woman's feet, and she began to gather them up with her soft hands. Oh, I'm sorry for making you pick those up. It's all right. Oh. She turned to face me after seemingly noticing something on the documents. Are you job hunting? Yes. Well, more like I'm looking for a new job. Are you serious? You appear very youthful. I mistook you for a college attendee. Although I only have a high school diploma, that would be my age. My former employer was unethical. I discovered that I was narrating my life narrative to an unfamiliar person. I paused when I realized I was speaking to someone who had been feeling under the weather. "Oh, I apologize. This doesn't need to be heard," simply said. "Forget it." The woman, who was now considerably better, said, "Hey," got up, and grasped my shoulder. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "Why don't you come work for my company?" What? A few days later, I found myself in front of a highly visible office building. I called from the designated floor as I nervously went through the automated doors. "Hello, this is Irving." "Greetings, this is George. I just got here." "I appreciate you calling. I'll come pick you up." Soon afterward, the woman from the previous day emerged from behind the front desk. Ashley Irving is her name. I'm standing in front of the president of the hotel management firm, which is her. I was shocked when, after assisting her at the station, she somehow scouted me and gave me her business card. Hotel management is a specialty of the Irving Group. They used to manage business hotels, but these days they serve a variety of customers, including both domestic and foreign travelers. Why would they be interested in me? Too wonderful to be true, it seemed. Seeing Miss Irving's face emerge from the main office confirmed my suspicions that it might be a hoax, whether I wanted to or not. I'm really appreciative to Miss Irving for hiring someone like me, who had to quit a firm due to health concerns and lacked major qualifications. I'll give this company my all. Now, Miss Irving is someone I owe a great deal to in addition to my mother. I promise myself that I will not give up, regardless of what occurs. Yes, even if my coworkers don't think highly of me as a mid-career hire with only a high school education. Crying and oblique remarks about my strange behavior started to happen on a daily basis. With so many people from elite universities in the Irving Group, it's likely surprising that there's a recent high school graduate sharing an office with them. Actually, there aren't any new graduate jobs available to recent high school grads. The only reason I was employed mid-career was because I had prior work experience. However, most mid-career hires at this organization want to grow in their positions. Nobody else could relate to my circumstances. My lack of an exceptional academic background and a clear path for career progression must have made me an unwanted presence to the other employees. It makes sense that people would ask, why someone like him? "George, were you truly too impoverished to attend college?" "Yes, exactly. You ought to have applied for scholarships or anything like. I was eager to get to work as soon as possible." "That much. For your parents to subject you to that, they must be awful." When they spoke of my mother, I felt a wave of rage, but I knew better than to yell. They could only say that since they knew nothing about my mother. I'd reminded myself not to be bothered by it. Unlike my prior employer, this one didn't overwork its employees beyond laws or deny them time off, even if I was ridiculed every day. I had a lot of luck. I couldn't afford to give up because those around me couldn't understand me. Yet, employing a recent high school graduate when the business is highly valuable. How is M. Irving feeling? Well, she's only the president for now. I'd inclined my head, bewildered at the contempt shown by my senior colleagues. "Well, by transitory, what do you mean? Have you not heard? Her father served as president until 6 months ago, at which point he unexpectedly became ill, forcing M. Irving to assume the role of second president." "I see. She hasn't developed into a fully fledged professional and is still learning how to manage the business. How soon will she be removed?" "She is therefore regarded as temporary." The older people laughed a lot among themselves. The staff still didn't trust Miss Irving enough to refrain from making comments like these. It was an emergency, so it was not surprising. I thought back to my initial encounter with Miss Irving. She maintained she was okay, even though it was obvious she felt ill. Maybe the strain and her present situation were making her feel unwell. I would have been devastated much sooner if it had been me. Peace was something I hoped she would find, but it didn't seem likely. I pondered whether I might be of any assistance. Well, then she's going to be replaced as president pretty soon, added a senior who had been listening in on our talk. There it is, after all, a legitimate presidential contender. The real contender, Daniel. Look, that's that manager over there. My senior subtly gestured to a man worker who was having a friendly conversation with his colleagues. He looked like he was in his early 40s. He was young and powerful. Everyone believed Daniel would take over as president before the outgoing president announced his resignation. He was raised for this position since he was a small boy, and his father is also an entrepreneur. Since he is a talented and well-respected individual, everyone assumed he would be the future president. Daniel has the ability to seize any chance that arises. However, everyone claims that because it was so abrupt, the president gave the position to his dependable daughter. Although it's unclear exactly what the outgoing president had in mind, it appears that everyone believed Daniel should be the next in line. It makes sense that they would be resentful of Miss Irving, given how their hopes were disappointed. It's undoubtedly enhanced by the fact that they were peers. M. Irving made assumptions that were unjustified in her criticism, and I questioned how she felt about her work. George, after a month of employment, how is the company doing? M. Irving gave me a call. Since she had personally scouted me, she was probably worried about me. I understand the content of the work. Everyone is still supporting me, but there aren't any serious problems. I didn't tell her that I actually have interpersonal issues so as not to concern her unnecessarily. I did not want to increase her anxiety. I'm glad to hear that. We frequently work with clients from other countries, so I was concerned about the English part. Since I've been learning English, there isn't much of a problem right now. That's helpful to know. I was worried because I found English to be difficult as well. I've always been pushed to learn languages by my mother. It will be crucial in the future, she remarked. It sounds like your mother is an amazing woman. Yes, however, I find it difficult to understand specialized words and commercial English. Everyone initially finds that difficult. Hang in there. It's simply a matter of getting used to it. After all, you work here for us. Certainly. Miss Irving gave a kind grin. George, you're truly inspiring. Are you serious? Indeed. Oh, and I don't think I ever explained to you why I was scouting you. You did mention my excitement and charisma. But how about if I suggested it's because you're my kind? What? My voice cracked at her sudden remark. I had never in my life been popular. I'd never been interested in a woman before. Well, I'm an adult. I thought she was kidding, right? I'll see you later, as I have a meeting now. M. Irving left the office, leaving me dazed. Her comment came so suddenly that my heart was racing. Was she teasing me in any way? It didn't feel horrible, though. After I became proficient in the specialized English, things went more smoothly with my work. I produced documentation in English and effectively conducted negotiations with clients from around the world. I started to like my work, and although it was a new sector to me, I soon developed a strong passion for it. Even the senior staff members who had laughed at me at first because I was a high school graduate started to appreciate my work. You really are quite competent. It had gotten much simpler to work here than when I had initially joined, even if I still heard comments here and there about only being a high school graduate. I didn't know how to react to the compliments from Kevin, the boss of the department. At my prior job, I had never received appreciation or was taken for granted. Should I accept that I still had a lot to learn, or should I be happy about it? This is the kind of situation where you should feel happy. I felt a touch on my shoulder and heard Miss Irving's voice. Suddenly, she was standing next to me. I felt the heat rising on my face from the unexpected touch, but she was merely supporting her subordinate. Was it not apparent to her how beautiful she was? Miss Irving, you looked like you were scolded when you were being praised, so I was surprised. Oh, I'm sorry. You should cease apologizing so easily. You did not act improperly. Yes, thank you. I bowed to Miss Irving and to Kevin. Kevin looked between Miss Irving and me while he scratched his cheek. To be honest, I had no idea what to anticipate when you initially joined, but it turns out that my concerns were unfounded. I seem to have a decent sense of who I want to be around. Having worked for the company longer than Miss Irving, Kevin said, "Indeed you do," with a laugh. Their roles had been changed. He was now her superior. It was awkward, he told me once, but she appeared to be growing accustomed to it. I felt a keen look coming at me as I watched the two of them. I glanced over to see Daniel staring at us. Daniel used to be thought of as the next president, I recalled. I was curious to know his thoughts on it. Did he really want to be president, or was he just indifferent? Well, I shouldn't have been worried about it. It was already chosen who will be the current president. Everyone was finally acknowledging Miss Irving's efforts. The situation would not change at this point. Since we worked in different divisions, I had never spoken with Daniel directly, so I was taken aback when he contacted me one day. It dealt with a significant issue. "George, I'd like you to help me with a project." Me? Being able to help someone from a different department is something I could never have imagined doing, especially after only a few months. However, because Miss Irving had brought me in, I wanted to help her as much as I could. "I am aware of you. I take it that Miss Irving's connections got you the job? You've been putting in a lot of effort and getting results, even if you're only a high school graduate. You seem like a capable worker to me, one who can work well under duress. Please lend your support to the next commercial negotiations." It surprised me. I had no idea Daniel had been observing my work. Sometimes I thought he was glaring at me, but maybe that was all in my head. Of course, I'd be glad to lend a hand however I can. Please lead the way for me. Daniel gave me a kind smile as I bowed deeply. You seem so sincere. Okay, let's work together on this. He gave me a few paperwork. I was in charge of taking meeting minutes in English, taking pictures of the presentation, and summarizing the materials for booklets. In order to prepare the pamphlets, I began by going over the following documents: the clients, the estimated project expenses, the staff involved, and the nations. This project's magnitude and sheer amount of intricacies were unmatched by anything I had ever worked on. I was so anxious about getting ready for this. Miss Irving was at the meeting in addition to Daniel and me. Miss Irving was the company's face, and she needed to be present even if Daniel would be in charge of the discussions. The significance of this meeting just made me feel more anxious. On the other hand, it was a fantastic chance to directly support Miss Irving's work. I painstakingly rewrote the booklets several times, getting input from various staff members until they were flawless. The meeting day finally arrived. I was waiting outside the client's office when Miss Irving and Daniel showed up. Daniel, though, appeared awfully ill. His forehead was furrowed, his face was pallid, and he appeared shaky on his feet. "How are you doing, Daniel?" "What's wrong, Daniel?" "To be honest, I've been experiencing vertigo and chills since this morning. However, I don't have a temperature." "That is very grave. It would have been better if you had called. It's my negotiation, so I couldn't miss it. I'm not going to allow you to lead in this situation. I will carry out the bargaining. You ought to get some rest." "I'm sorry." Miss Irving received his notes from Daniel. "These are my notes. Sorry for the inconvenience. It's not at all difficult. We support one another when we are in need. I'm grateful, George. I'm depending on your help." Yes, Daniel's commitment made me think of my mother. I decided to give it my all for him. Daniel was waiting in a cafe nearby. Though it would have been better if he had gone home, he was too anxious about the meeting to get any sleep. We had to try our hardest to calm Daniel's fears. Although Miss Irving was highly excellent at speech, she had won school speech contests. Therefore, the presentation would be in English. She could manage it nearly as well as a Japanese presentation. I was prepared to take minutes when Miss Irving started the bargaining. Miss Irving spoke in English with clarity and fluency as soon as the meeting got underway. Someone held up their hand halfway through. It was a query. When Miss Irving motioned for them to continue, we were taken aback. It was a Chinese language question. Since it is not unusual for attendees to be from other nations, we held the meeting in English, which is the universal language. Why were they speaking Chinese now? Miss Irving requested if they might repeat the question in English, but she was still not sure what to make of it. The person asking the inquiry gave out a really angry look in response. "Excuse me, Miss Irving, what's going on?" She was pressed by the client's representative. I was told there would be someone who speaks multiple languages at this meeting, so I made time in my busy schedule for this. Multiple languages? Nothing about that had come to our attention. Daniel had made no mention of speaking more than one language. Was something wrong here? The client scowled even more at Miss Irving's response. Was that a lie? No, we didn't say that you would take any action to arrange this meeting. This is a trust-related issue. There was a miscommunication. I was panicking much like Ms. Irving. I felt compelled to speak up, but should I, a new employee, take over? Would doing so lead to further issues? I mean, I'm simply a recent high school graduate with little experience in the field. Ms. Irving's comments, "Don't worry, you're one of our employees," kept repeating in my head. Yes, I work for a company. I'm here to help with this negotiation. Please give it time. I bear the responsibility. I'll respond to your inquiries. In order to stop Ms. Irving from being questioned, I got up and spoke louder. Everyone looked at me, as they should have. In reference to your prior inquiry, I addressed the individual who posed the query in Mandarin. The person asking the inquiry initially blinked in shock, but as I explained, they nodded. Then another person held up their hand. It was in French this time. I answered in French instead. I had trouble understanding the technical jargon, but there was nothing I could do about it, so I tried to explain using motions. Upon responding to that query, the first customer service agent inclined closer to me. "So, you're capable after all." "Okay, I'm sorry. At the end, I intended to conduct the queue and a session personally." "Don't worry. I apologize for disturbing you. Kindly proceed. I'm grateful. Ms. Irving. I'll handle things from here." "Yes, I guess." I was sorry to have left Ms. Irving in disbelief, but I was frantic and did not have time to give an explanation. I answered a question in German after continuing the lecture in English. I used the context to infer the meaning of new terminology before responding and returning to English. The question was then asked to me in Indonesian before switching back to English. Despite my disorientation, I completed the presentation and bowed. The room exploded in applause. "You are very remarkable." Sincerely, I didn't have high expectations, but you truly are multilingual. The president of the client, Mr. Harris, extended his hand to shake hands. He asked one last inquiry, irrelevant to business, as I shook his hand. "But what is the number of languages you speak?" "I am able to carry on an 8-language conversation." "Whoa. Do you find studying languages enjoyable?" "Indeed. As a national interpreter, my mother works. I have priceless memories associated with every language because she used to read me picture books from different places. I worked really hard in my studies because I wanted to be as multilingual as my mother." "I understand. We would absolutely like to work with your company if we had someone as trustworthy as you." "Many thanks for that." My legs felt weak, and an hour or so later, I exited the office building. "Hey George, how are you doing?" I apologize. I was very exhausted after the meeting. I was inundated with questions while the presidents were debating the contract. I felt that a lot of the staff were just having fun with my language abilities. They took turns asking questions in different languages, happy to hear their home tongues spoken with ease. We had worked so hard to earn this trust, and failing now would mean losing it. I hoped that the contract negotiations would come to an end quickly because I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. I was free at last, which is what got me to this worn-out state. I was completely exhausted, even if there were no significant mistakes, and I even succeeded in winning the respect of the staff. Daniel suddenly materialized in front of me as I was making my way to the cafe where he was probably waiting. "How are you feeling, Daniel?" "More importantly, the deal didn't seem to go well based on your condition, right?" Daniel appeared to misunderstand and shrug his shoulders in disappointment when he saw how tired I was. "George, even though I trusted you to help me, this is what happened. So disheartening. Actually, I was mistaken to believe that you were someone Ms. Irving knew." Ms. Irving and I were left behind as Daniel went on talking without giving us an opportunity to clarify. "Ms. Irving is also at fault for the failure of such a significant negotiation," he continued. "Hold on. What's happening?" "Daniel, I'm only expressing the truth. You hired him, so you are accountable for this. I will need to discuss this in the internal meeting." "No, hold on. A president must be able to make judgments about people. Expect to have your credibility called into question." Daniel seems slightly satisfied, even in spite of his angry words. What made him acting so rigidly? "Daniel, did you lie about having many language skills?" Ms. Irving gave Daniel a dubious glance. He was not perturbed. "Oh, that? Yes, I may have brought it up. It's difficult to get an appointment with that company, so it's worth lying a little to get in." Did they not find it credible either? How come? Daniel lied, which put us in a difficult situation. Getting an appointment in this way is unimaginable. Did you stage your illness to get out of the deal after undermining us with this? How come? It was you who first pushed for the requirement of speaking multiple languages, after all. How come you didn't inform us? Was this meant to lead us into a trap? Not at all. That is correct, really. Although Daniel found the claim implausible, he readily acknowledged it. I wanted to make sure you could manage a situation like this. A president who is incapable is unfit to hold the office. What topic are you discussing? This might have done a great deal of harm. Ms. Irving was correct. The reputation of our business was in jeopardy. We barely escaped a disaster. Daniel, though, appeared unperturbed. In fact, amused. Merely being president has little bearing on one company. Besides, you should take some of the blame for not handling it better. You ought to have shown more adaptability. You appear perplexed. We never claimed that the talks had failed. What? Daniel's jaw fell agape. A preliminary contract was obtained by us. In other words, neither George nor I am at fault. You are the only one having problems. What topic are you discussing? That isn't feasible. You are welcome to verify for yourself if you do not believe me. In any case, the meeting will receive a report on your actions today, so be ready. Let's go. Miss Irving grabbed my arm without noticing Daniel remained motionless. I walked away from the scene. It was confirmed the next day that the negotiations were successful and that we had won a sizable contract. Daniel's activities were also discussed at the same time. Subsequent analysis showed that Daniel had been undermining his colleagues' efforts and then claiming credit for resolving the problems. Even though he was capable from the beginning, he had turned to sabotage others in order to obtain greater attention. When M. Irving was named president, he was certain that he was the legitimate heir to the office. He used devious methods to get retribution. Daniel was fired after his wrongdoings were revealed. He tried to resist even in his last minutes, but Miss Irving spoke to him sternly. "I now see why my father picked me over you. You were capable, but you couldn't value people," he would always say. He believed you were not prepared to serve as president. The outgoing president had recognized Daniel's duplicity. Although I could sympathize with Daniel's displeasure at not being acknowledged for his services, success cannot be attained by stepping on other people. I hoped he would take stock of his errors and move on. I mean, I'm one of those people that switched careers after things stabilized. I received another summons to the president's office. Miss Irving gave me a bow of the head. George, I sincerely appreciate everything you've done. If you hadn't handled the circumstance, we wouldn't be here. Will you please raise your head? All I was doing was my job. I should be the one thanking you, anyway. You have my eternal gratitude for taking me in. I've always wanted to pay you back for that. You accomplished far enough. The best compensation are your well-earned language abilities and the knowledge you've acquired here. You've come a long way in a short amount of time, and your work is really admirable. I graduated from high school, as you are aware, and my family wasn't very wealthy. I've sadly discovered that life isn't fair, but I've also come to understand that you can improve your lot in life if you put in enough work. I've been working hard for myself, that's all. You're very admirable, so different from me. Miss Irving smiled sadly. What topic are you discussing? Despite receiving a surprising presidential appointment, you have been putting in a lot of work to improve this organization. No, I'm not deserving of such recognition. I've abused my position to further my own interests. What do you mean by that? It was for personal reasons that I brought you into the organization. I am therefore unfit to serve as president. She'd never really stated why she scouted me for personal reasons, but now that she brought it up, it makes sense. You were kind to me, that's all. I don't quite follow. I had been making blunders since the morning when we first met, and everyone was berating me and claiming that I was only here because of my father's connections. I felt like I had no allies in the world, and I was at my breaking point. However, you were kind to me despite not understanding my circumstances. I believed that this person might be on my side. I thus dragged you in firmly after learning that you were looking for work. You were only utilized by me. I apologize. Miss Irving covered her eyes with a handkerchief. I felt powerless and had no idea how to handle a woman who was crying. Used me. That isn't how I view things. You instilled confidence in me. I would never had the confidence to use my language talents had it not been for you. I understood that my work wasn't in vain. Shall I tell it right now? Would doing so be self-serving? I reluctantly find that I am brave now. Nothing is more satisfying than lending a helping hand to a woman I respect. What? Well, I realize this is a bold statement on my part, but no, not at all. Miss Irving suddenly grasped my hand. I sensed that her body temperature had increased. I used to just use you, but now I respect your generosity and diligence. It looked too wonderful to be true, but this was no accident, George. We achieved this outcome because we had been truthful and hard-working. We then went to see Ashley's father, the former president, who was admitted to the hospital. Ashley's father had become chairman after he had resigned as president, and we told him about the internal problems and the negotiation's success. We also discussed our friendship with him. A decent person for Ashley. As her father, I'm relieved that she was simply concerned with her career. Don't say unnecessary things. It was sweet to watch their father and daughter bond. All of a sudden, it occurred to me that Ashley would enjoy getting to know my mother. I have to start studying management so that I can help Ashley more going forward. These days, my life is about more than just getting money. I consider myself lucky to have the ability to improve my quality of life. It's been said that learning is a lifelong journey. Nothing that is learned is ever wasted. I wish to continue studying a great deal of things in light of that lesson.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, No one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.